Strap in, weirdos. Today we go to the drive-in.
What you are about to witness is an odd show made for odd humans.
Welcome back, everyone, to Well, That's Weird. My name is Madame De Fer, and at this point, I am earning a reputation as your hostess with the grossest. It's summer 2025, and shit is off the fucking rails. To commiserate the monsters pulling the strings up top right now, we're going to talk about two actually fun movie monsters that pulled the strings in their two classic films. That being said, I understand that classic film is relative to who you're talking to. One film is a 1980 reptilian flick that makes quite a splash and might also give Jaws a run for its money. The other film takes us back all the way to 1958, where big bug movies reign supreme, and this one is absolutely no exception. So without further ado, let's dive into our summer 2025 creature feature episode with Earth versus the Spider and Alligator. And as a disclaimer to my returning listeners and anybody who's joining us for the first time, these episodes are not spoiler free. I am going to spoil the hell out of these movies all the time, every time. So consider this your warning. If you want to go watch these movies before you watch this episode, stop right here, go watch them, and then come back and tell me what you thought about them. It's only fitting that we start this review by talking about Earth versus the Spider, which was the big inspiration for making this particular episode. Earth versus the Spider, otherwise known as The Spider, is a 1958 film by legendary director Burt I. Gordon, starring Ed Kemmer, June Kenny, and Eugene Person. This film is all about teenagers from a rural community and their high school science teacher joining forces to battle a giant mutant spider. And that's it, guys. Boom! What more do you want? I was really inspired to want to talk about Earth versus the Spider after watching an episode of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs a couple weeks ago, where he featured this film. This episode of Joe Bob was centered around the drive-in movie theater phenomena, and it really inspired me to want to talk about this film because, one, I have extensive history watching lots of creature feature horror films up the wazoo. But also growing up, I've actually been to a couple drive-ins, two of them that I love that are actually still open up in the Northeast United States. One is the Saco Drive-In in Saco, Maine. And the other one is the Wellfleet Drive-In over in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, over in Cape Cod. There are some genres that really benefit from the drive-in movie watching experience, to see it on the big screen, to take it all in, and to feel small in your seat. Big monster creature features are perfect for this. It's no coincidence that while drive-in movie theaters were picking up and taking off, that there was also an uptick in big monster features. We have big aliens, big bugs, big reptiles, big everything, and they're all taking over. It's always up to the human race at the end of the day to save the day. Earth versus the Spider kicks off in a town called River Falls, and our opening scene is focused on a driver who is making his way back from buying a birthday gift for his daughter. He's looking at this gift, he's smiling, and then all of a sudden, in a change of tone, we see a rope come towards his head in the window shield area of the car, and we see a ton of blood, and then it just cuts to black. It's amazing in 1958 how much blood they were using in this particular movie. This is the perfect example of this. Fade to black, and we cut to the town of River Falls, and we're following Carol. It's her birthday. Her dad was the one driving the truck that night, and she is distraught because her dad never came home. Just a reminder, too, this is 1958, so this wasn't a time of cell phones or the internet or anything. Like, if you had to get in touch with somebody, you either had to call them on a landline, you could write them a letter, or you could go see them in person. But your options are fairly limited if you're trying to get a hold of somebody who is missing. Carol is walking through the town, River Falls, when we are introduced to her ding-dong buffoon boyfriend, Mike. Mike gets better over time, but he really starts this story as kind of a dirtbag. He seems annoyed when Carol isn't interested in opening his gift. He also seems annoyed when she starts talking about how her dad didn't show back up home last night, how worried she is. And not only that, but there definitely is an implication that her dad does this often or frequently enough that Mike isn't concerned about where her dad is. He just thinks that it's another day and that he'll show up at some point. I get the feeling that Mike is implying her dad is an alcoholic. Either way, he's being kind of an asshole about the whole thing. Carol asks Mike if he will help her go find her dad later after school, and he agrees. So in school later, in science class, Mike approaches his friend Joe. Joe is supposed to be, I'm assuming, a 17 or 18-year-old teenage boy, but was played by a 35-year-old actor. It is really obvious. It kind of adds to the charm of this spectacle of a film, though. None of these adults are cosplaying well as teenagers, but we'll let it pass for 𝘗𝙁𝙤𝙤𝙀𝙁 sake, I guess. Mike and Carol head out for a ride to go see if they can find Carol's dad's car. One of my favorite scenes in this film is this shot of them driving down the road, and the green screen in the back is just terrible. It gave me similar vibes to the scene in Airplane where they are driving to get to the airport and all this crazy shit is happening in the green screen in the background. The actors are so stagnant and in place while all this movement around them is happening. It's just incredible. They come across some type of a crash scene in the road and they find this rope that's kind of silky. It's kind of sticky. It is the thing that caused the accident. As they're making their way around the crime scene, they find the gift from Carol's dad on the road. It's a bracelet. They find his truck crashed. And then they see the entrance for a big cave with a big "Do Not Trespass" sign. And they think, hey, maybe he went into the cave. Maybe he went looking for shelter. It might have been cold the night before. Kind of a rational thought process. And they decide they're going to go into the cave to try to look for her dad. The cave scenes in this movie are so cool. 𝘗𝙁𝙤𝙤𝙀 went by himself out to the Carlsbad Caverns over here in New Mexico. And he ended up taking some long exposure shots of the caverns. And he used those images to create the matte backing for the caves that the kids and the townspeople would end up walking through during this movie. The caves look really, really good. And that's because he did a little bit of extra due diligence as a filmmaker to co-capture really cool caves and bring it into his film. I love that element. The minute I saw that in the film, it's so distinct. If you've been to the Carlsbad Caverns, you will know that that is what you're looking at in this film, and it is just amazing. My other really favorite thing about this film, they're going through the cave, they're looking for her dad, and as they're going through all these different areas, they come across a hilarious sight.
Oh, Mike, I think we better go back.
I think you're right.
There is something so charming to me about using store-bought like Halloween skeletons in films as props for dead bodies. The props in this film really stick out as being fairly cheap, but it absolutely works, especially for a film in 1958. Eventually, the kids are making their way through the cave and they come across a web, which is just more of this rope that they found in the street weaved into a sort of spider web for some big ass spider. This is not a small spider. This is gonna be a big boy, to say the least. They end up seeing this spider, and the thing is very scary. The spider could be the lead singer of the best metal band of all time. The screeches coming out of this thing are just insane. It's kind of doing this like, wow. There's also this amazing theremin music behind the spider. The whole thing is just great. Kids run out of the cave. They decide to go right to their science teacher. They also go home to Carol's mother. They need to figure out where her dad is, and they need to figure it out fast. The science teacher in this film is amazing. Right off the bat, he totally believes that there is a huge spider in this cave. And he calls the dopey sheriff, who is the anti-science guy in the film. These anti-science guys in the films always sound so dumb, because at the end of the day, opinion is a lot different than fact. And science is fact. This dopey sheriff guy does not believe there's a spider down there. He decides that ultimately he has to do his job, though, and he gets a search party together to go look for Carol's dad. The search party goes with Carol and Mike back down to the cave, and unfortunately that is where they find Carol's dad's dried up skeleton. It's not quite as bad as the Halloween store skeletons, but it is hilarious. They dried him up to give the impression that the spider would have sucked out his fluids, which is just disgusting and also awesome science. I forgot to mention too, but before they even come down in the cave, the science teacher ends up calling some homies over to bring a metric crapload of DDT to take out this spider. Which is smart, because from his rationale, rifles and guns won't do anything against a big spider, but maybe toxic chemical will. The search party ends up getting back over to the web, where all the guys get gas masks on. They decide they're going to spray this thing with DDT and get rid of their bug problem. When they do, though, they instigate their subject, and at that moment, the spider comes back out to take sweet, sweet revenge on anybody who's still stuck in that web. Unfortunately, we have one cop who has a very hilarious and unfortunate death scene. You don't actually really see anything happen, but again, Burt I. Gordon's use of blood to portray violence in the film when violence isn't being explicitly shown is a good touch. So now they've got a real body count. So they start bringing the bodies out of the cave, and as they do, the science teacher is telling the sheriff, yeah, I want to study this spider over here for science. Why is this spider so big? How did it mutate? How did it even get here? If I remember correctly, at one point he even mentions how it's a tree spider or a wood spider, and that there would be no way, shape, and form that this thing could ever get this big. So all rational. Like, the science teacher's totally right. They should do more science and look into this. This does come back up again, but ends up resolving itself really quickly when the movie takes a turn halfway through. Now they have this dead spider that the science teacher wants to study, so he uses half of his life savings to get this spider moved from the cave over to the high school auditorium, which already is a terrible idea. Wicked bad idea. Don't put the dead spider with kids in a school. The spider attracts some visitors, but ultimately the science teacher is just waiting to be able to transport this spider from the auditorium to an actual university so they can truly study it. But things take a bit of a turn, and we can blame it all on rock and roll. Let me explain. Carol and Mike have to go back down to the cave at some point because Carol realizes that in the mix of all this stuff that happened down there, she ended up dropping the bracelet that her dad was going to gift her for her birthday. It's the last sentimental gift he was ever going to give her, so it means a lot, and she convinces Mike to ask Joe again to borrow his car so they can go back to the cave and check things out. There's a bit of back and forth banter between Mike and Joe while Mike is asking to borrow Joe's car again. At one point, Mike says this amazing line.
Go to the rehearsal. Look, my mouth is getting tired. Are we friends or aren't we? Okay.
I heard this line and I thought, wow, this is something I'm going to need to introduce into my phrasing going forward. It's so good. But Joe ends up letting Mike take the car so him and Carol can go check the cave out again. Joe stays at the school because he actually has to rehearse with his band. He is the band leader, and it turns out that there's a school dance the next night, and the band's got to practice. Unfortunately, all the rooms in the school have been taken, so Joe asks the janitor, Hugo, if he'll let them into the auditorium where the dead spider is. Hugo ends up caving and letting the students in after Joe makes this plead about how they're young children and how he needs his help. It is so funny. Again, I just want to stress that the actor who is playing Joe was 35 in real life. So hearing him even talk about himself as a young child is ridiculous. So Hugo lets him in the auditorium. Spider's over on one side. The band and the setup are over on the other side. They make some hilarious comment about how they're going to bring back the dead with their rock and roll. And then they start rocking.
Now, guys, start with the opening number. And don't go to sleep on it. Play with everything you've got. Loud enough to wake the dead, huh? Play it good and loud. Okay.
Some students come in. Everybody's having a great time. They're dancing. And the rock and roll literally brings the spider back from the dead. DDT ain't got shit on good rock and roll. So the theremin kicks back on. We have this screaming spider. We have kids running around. Also have to say, all the shots of the spider overwhelmingly throughout this movie are pretty good composite shots. They did some really cool practical effects in some of the scenes. They did forced perspective. It looks good for 1958. Obviously, there's some things that don't always match up, but I can't really complain at the end of the day. It's kind of amazing to watch a gigantic spider attack a small town in America. Everybody leaves. They head out of the school. Hugo tries to get a hold of the science teacher to let him know what's happening. Hugo becomes a victim of said spider. This is the point in the movie where shit hits the fan. The spider gets out into town. It starts creating a complete ruckus. Everybody's freaking out. I love this like backlot looking American town too. It's definitely a set that has been used a million times over and over and over in so many different films. But it looks so quintessential 50s America that I love it. It looks so good. There's some really iconic shots in this part too. The woman screaming with her dress caught in the door, that is schlocky and hilarious. Also the scary scene of a baby by itself in the street covered in blood with bodies and emptiness around. It's very unsettling. It's pretty intense for a 50s film. Definitely more than what I was expecting. It's 𝘀𝙀 Gordon, so it does make sense that he pushed his visuals and the envelope just a little bit more than what would have been expected at that time. Our science teacher friend partners back up with Sheriff and his deputy. Deputy Dave has to go and try to get some military grade equipment so they can get this spider. And so he takes off on a motorcycle. Science teacher finds out at that point also that the spider is making its way over to his neighborhood. His wife and baby are just relaxing at home when all of a sudden this spider shows up on their front doorstep to give them hell. All this chaos is happening in town, and ultimately while this is happening, Carol and Mike go back to that cave to find that bracelet. They do end up finding the bracelet, but as they try to leave the cave with the bracelet, they end up getting lost. That will come into play later. Amidst everything that's going on, townspeople see that the spider has made its way back towards the cave so it can head home. At that point, everyone decides that what they need to do is close the cave off so that they can entomb the spider in the cave, and then they don't have to worry about it continuing to do what it's doing. They're going to need to blow it up and keep that spider in there. But they make all these preparations without realizing that Carol and Mike are still in the cave. And not only that, now the spider is back in the cave with Mike and Carol. So that just makes things a little bit more complex. I also have to mention on a quick side note, the sheriff in town is so useless. He just keeps swearing in civilians to continue to do these like odd jobs as part of this investigation. He is just the worst character. The whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I know I shouldn't wish death upon anyone, but if anyone had to die, it wouldn't be depressing if it were the sheriff. I mean, at one point, we lose Deputy Dave. Deputy Dave gets his fluid sucked out by the spider, but unfortunately, we're still tethered to this wonderful sheriff that we get to hang out with. I really hate that guy. So all the guys make their way back to the cave with all their explosives, and they blow that shit up. At that point, Carol's mom and Mike's dad show up at the cave being like, hey, our kids are still in there. You got to get them out. And they're thinking, oh crap, why didn't you show up 5 minutes before this? That would have been very, very helpful. Again, also the problem with this film and what makes it so fun is that in that era, You didn't have cell phones. You did not have quick communication between people. So a crisis like this would be catastrophic simply because there's no way to let people know quick enough that this is happening. Very, very scary. So ultimately, Mike and Carol are blown up with the spider as part of this explosion, and they get lost further in the cave. It's a pretty quick end to the film once they realize they have to get Mike and Carol out. They dig a hole, they find them. There's all this chaos with the spider trying to kill the people who are trying to get out. They end up electrocuting the spider, and then it dies, and then they bury it again. They seal the cave off, and all is well and good. The end. What more do you want? And I do love that last shot of like the spider all impaled at the bottom of the cave floor that it fell. It is so, so good. This is a super fun flick. It's a perfect 50s creature feature. It's got the big bug. It's got the young teens and the rock and roll. It's got the science denier. It's everything you want in a movie that you would go see at the drive-in in 1958. And even in 2025, this film makes for a great watching experience. So on the weirdness scale, we are going to put Earth versus the Spider at weirder than expected. I loved the big spider. I loved all of the matte backgrounds and especially the Carlsbad Cavern stuff, which is so unusual. That in and of itself is weird. I also think these elements with, again, like the store-bought skeleton and this and that, those are all funny. Joe being 35 years old playing a teenager, so funny. All these weird quirks that were probably somewhat unintentional make for such a charming viewing experience. So go watch Earth versus the Spider. Maybe it'll kick off some inspirational watching. Like you can follow it up with Tarantula, or if you're anything like me, maybe Eight-Legged Freaks. I hope you watch it, and I really hope you like it. I definitely think it was a fun time, and it's a perfect summer film. Now we're gonna talk about Alligator. Alligator is a 1980 film directed by Louis Teague, starring Robert Forster, Robin Riker, and Michael Gazzo. A pet baby alligator is flushed down a toilet and survives in the city sewers. 12 years later, it grows to be an enormous size thanks to a diet of discarded laboratory dogs injected with growth hormones. Now, humans have entered the menu. Alligator is a much more serious in tone film than Earth versus the Spider. That being said, there are some very fun elements of Alligator that I think have been the lasting legacy for a film like this. There's some crime noir elements mixed in with this creature feature flick. The big one being that our main character is a conflicted detective. He lost his last partner on a scene, so he's dealing with a lot of emotional baggage coming from that angle of his life. On the opposite side, we are dealing with a herpetologist, Marissa, who is basically the reason for this whole film. To kick it off, we start at what I assume is a zoo. It could be, for all I know, an alligator sanctuary. I'm pretty sure it's a zoo. And Marissa is there as a child. It's the 60s, and she is there with her parents. You know how they do shows with like the alligators and handlers, kind of like a Crocodile Dundee style thing where they like taunt them and mess around with them a little bit and, you know, put on a show. Well, unfortunately for Bobby Brazel at this zoo sanctuary place, he is the unfortunate receiver of a alligator bite, and everybody is watching as this happens during the show. Marissa is freaked out. Her mom thinks it's fake, whatever. It's a whole thing. And as they're leaving from this experience, they end up running into somebody who is selling baby alligators. Again, I'm assuming at the zoo, but like, I don't think that's legal. but this isn't my movie. So that's the choice that they made. Marissa, even as her parents are talking to her about what she will do with this alligator once it grows up, because it's a baby now, she's all, oh, I'll just donate it to a zoo, or I'll give it to a zoo. The rationale behind getting an alligator that you then give away later on in life really doesn't make sense. It's bad parenting 101. Marissa names her alligator Ramon. He's super, super cute, and she is just in love with this alligator. But one day when she's away at school, her ding-dong dad decides to come home, says that the alligator is pooping in the hamper. I don't know what the alligator's doing in the clothes hamper. Just sounds like a great excuse. And he takes the alligator and flushes it down the toilet. Poor Ramon is about to go on the journey of a lifetime in that sewer system, but he will come out on top ultimately in the end. We then move forward to 12 years later and we meet Detective Downer. He's still struggling with the loss of his partner from a while back, and so he ends up in the beginning of this film buying himself a dog. The pet store is an interesting introduction because the associate working behind the counter is ultimately one of the people involved in smuggling animals to this pharmaceutical testing facility where they are injecting them with growth hormones. It's slightly convoluted. It also is giving off wicked Beethoven 1 vibes with the animal testing and these like evil cronies who are doing all this stuff in the background. But there is so much more being set up here than what meets the eye. And that's something I did like about Alligator. I actually felt that story-wise, there are moments in this film where you get all of a sudden a reveal of something or an element that you didn't notice before gets tied in later on. And it was more thought out than I was kind of expecting it to be. So that was really fun in and of itself. The movie kind of lulls along for a bit as a semi-crime drama. They ultimately find a dead body in the sewer along with the dead body of a overgrown dog breed that is unusual. While this goes on, our detective is essentially gathering more clues, trying to figure out what's happening. He's trying to find the connection between the dog and the dead body. The connection isn't clear just off the get-go, but what is clear is that this body that they found in the sewer is not intact. Something is feasting in the sewer, and it isn't the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles eating pizza. It's worse. It may or may not be their shitty relative, Ramon. While the detective is looking for clues as to what happened, we are introduced to 𝘁𝐴𝐷 Pharmaceuticals. They are the ones who are doing this illegal animal testing. There is this one particular chemist who is a big piece of shit. The detective even goes to him at one point to start asking him about this large dog that they found in the sewer too, to ask what might have been doing something like that. Also, like, you're doing animal testing. Can you tell me why there could be like animal bodies in the sewer that are unusual? And the chemist is not having it. He is definitely like very close-lipped. You need somebody like that to keep your trade secrets, if you know what I mean. On a side note, what gets revealed later is that this particular chemist is actually getting married to Big Daddy 𝘁𝐴𝐷's daughter. So there's a bigger involvement there between the chemist, 𝘁𝐴𝐷 Pharmaceuticals, and the things that are happening with these animals. We cut to a scene with our animal store clerk, and he is bringing a bunch of dead dog bodies down to the sewer to dispose of them so nobody will find out his involvement and what they're doing over at 𝘁𝐴𝐷 Pharmaceuticals. This guy just gets a little too close to that sewer water and then comes face to face with our good old friend Ramon. Although Ramon is much bigger than the last time we saw him, and not just like full-size alligator big, he's like growth hormone big. And the way that they even tease and show the alligator in this film is very fun. They kind of had like a semblant teasing of it, similar to like a Jurassic Park or a Jaws, where they used a lot of prosthetics, animatronics, and puppets to get some of these really unique close-up shots of the alligator, and looks really, really good at the end of the day. No complaints about our friend Ramon. I think he looks spectacular. As things begin to escalate, Detective Downer realizes that he needs help and he needs to go down to the sewer to see what exactly is going on down there. He ends up getting this guy Kelly from the force who joins him on his excursion. These two end up having a very short budding cop romance here for a minute, which is sweet. I'm pretty sure I also didn't mistakenly see this, but if I saw correctly, there was even some like butt grabbing. The whole thing is funny because this Detective Downer is so not interested in like being close to people. He's not trying to be vulnerable, and this guy is definitely trying to work it out of him, and I think it ends up working a little bit. But then they run into Ramon, and unfortunately Kelly becomes Ramon's next victim. So now Detective Downer has 2 cops that have died on his watch, and he's feeling pretty bad about it. There's a press conference and things are set up where we're introduced to this journalist Kemp, who's also keeping tabs on Detective Downer and all of his bad luck and essentially reporting on it. The guy is a jerk. And what this is doing is thematically setting it up for him ultimately getting eaten by Ramon. It's what we refer to as street justice, but in this film, we're going to refer to it as Ramon justice. All these people are dying, things are happening, it's getting crazy, and then we're introduced to a herpetologist to potentially tell us what's going on in the sewer. And the herpetologist is our friend Marissa, Ramon's original owner from 12 years prior. She's all grown up now, was apparently very inspired by her short-lived time with Ramon to take on herpetology. So good for her. Better her than me, because I'm not getting close to anything like that. And yeah, once she's introduced to the film, it starts to take a little bit of a directional turn. Detective Downer becomes enamored by her, and they develop a bit of a sexual romance, if I may say so myself. It's weird too, because he keeps referring to her as a kid throughout this film and this and that. And actually, she is pretty young in the grand scheme of things. If she was even 12 when she got Ramon, that would make her 24 in this current situation. And Detective Downer is easily got to be in his 40s. So it is like he is beyond her in age, in experience, in whatever. At moments, he can be a big dick in letting her know that he also knows this and feels this way as well. But they continue to have this back and forth, like, I need you, you need me, we need to solve this together. You're a herpetologist, I'm a detective, maybe we can figure this out. But what ends up happening in the midst of all of this is that Detective Downer gets fired. He starts to pry a little too closely to Slade Pharmaceuticals. Again, Mr. Slade over here, who kind of presents some specific corporate douchebag energy. He has enough power that he can influence the police department to have them remove Detective Downer from doing his job. The force ends up hiring a alligator hunter who looks uncannily like the cousin of Chevy Chase. They have him written so well that he is just so slimy to everybody. You can tell that he himself is a bit of a reptile, much like the things he likes to hunt. Chevy's cousin ends up going down in the sewer with a few other guys to potentially go in and hunt down Ramon. Ultimately, he falls on the receiving end of Ramon justice. Things are going really well for Ramon and really poorly for everyone else. And we also have a moment where Detective Downer talks shit to Marissa at one point. She cuts him off and then he comes crawling back. The whole thing is so boring. It really, in the grand scheme of things, it has no connection and means really nothing to everything else that's happening with Ramon and this alligator chaos. But this is also a thing I just hate, is this idea of manufactured romances in certain types of films that don't really need them. I could have totally been fine with Marissa, the herpetologist, just being involved because she was Ramon's original owner when she was a little kid. Did not need the element of her romantically attaching herself to Detective Downer. I don't think it really adds anything, and honestly just makes him end up looking more schmucky for some of the things that he does and says to her in particular. And things seriously start to ramp up. Ramon gets out of the sewer. He ends up having a few moments in different people's backyards and stuff. There's a great scene of him at a children's party in a pool. That physically makes no sense as to why he would be there and how it would have worked out the way it did. But the scene itself and the way it's shot look really fun, and it's just super schlocky. We move through the story just a little bit further, and sure enough, we end up over at the big Slade mansion. I'm pretty sure they're either celebrating the wedding of the chemist to the daughter, or maybe it's just a party to celebrate them and their engagement. I'm not 100% sure, but Ramon comes in with a sweet vengeance. You don't just mess with growth hormones and animal testing and come out of it unscathed. This is your lesson, Mr. Slade. You're welcome. Signed, Ramon Justice. Ramon ends up killing the mayor. He ends up killing Slade. It's like everybody who deserves to get their comeuppance totally does. And that's one of the most gratifying elements of the movie, other than the fact that while it's happening, it looks so good. There is no overkill CGI or any of that at any point in this film. It is just glorious what they are able to capture. I'm such a fan of good old practical effects. So we come to the end of the film, and Ramon has made his way back down to the sewer. And actually, in a very similar turn of fate to Earth versus the Spider, they decide, frig, we gotta blow this thing up. We just gotta blow it up. It's time. This is the way. Big creature, big explosion. Apparently, you have to have the two. This is very common in creature feature flicks. They coincide. Detective Downer has to have his character arc, right? So he ultimately is the one who goes down to the sewer to blow Ramon up. And there's this very intense scene after he's already set everything up where he's trying to get out of the sewer and he's blocked from getting out of there, and Marissa tries to help him, and it's very, very intense. And it ultimately goes nowhere because he ends up getting out of the sewer just fine, redeems himself, and Ramon gets blown up. He gets blown the fuck up. And I love movie explosions, but especially when it involves like a fake body or something. Like, this goes back to the Halloween store skeleton thing. I just love practical use of props. So like, even when this alligator is exploding, you can see the spot in like the prosthetic chest where it's like blows out, and it's awesome. It was fun. R.I.P. Ramon. I thought you were awesome. I loved your street justice, and you were so, so cute as a baby. Just a little bit scarier as an adult. But wait, even though Ramon is dead, we get one final shot of another baby alligator in the sewer. The cycle continues. And we would end up getting an alligator 2 years later. I have yet to see it, but it's definitely on my docket considering how enjoyable this film was. So there were some really cool similarities between Alligator and Earth versus the Spider. I just personally felt that Alligator tonally could have played into some more of its humor, kind of the way that Earth versus the Spider did unintentionally, but still, in more of the serious moments, I just felt like the energy in the movie slogged so much, especially when you have like the alligator hunter and you have like crappy journalist Kemp. You got all these fairly interesting people involved and a really great movie monster with Ramon. I feel like the schlock was there, but it could have been wicked ramped up that much more and would have made it a million times weirder. And on that note, for the weirdness scale, I'm going to have to put Alligator at I've seen weirder. Alligator definitely had all of the pillars of a good creature feature movie. It just needed a push in some of those funnier directions. And I think it would have made this a much more time-tested classic in the genre than it actually is. That being said, Alligator and Alligator 2, I have heard, are a really fun double feature. So if you're a fan of reptiles, or maybe you are a reptile, you should check this one out. It's not necessarily a super weird film, but it definitely was a fun film. And so we wrap on our creature feature episode. These are definitely two films that are very approachable. I don't find either of them to be really offensive in any way, shape, or form. As my pillar of approachability when it comes to films, I look at a film and I think to myself, would my mother watch it? My mom does not like horror movies. My mom does not even care for like funny, dumb, schlocky films. She is a much more serious, a much more calculated woman. And I look at these films and I think my mom definitely wouldn't hate that. And that's my gauge for recommending a film to a normal everyday audience. My last episode on body horror definitely was not for everybody, but these two films, I would argue, should be for everybody. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Well, That's Weird. If you liked what you saw today, go over to the Rabotat Rec YouTube channel and hit like and subscribe for more content like this. My name is Madame De Fer, and well, that was weird. Stick around for the next episode, babes.